I thought I was helping him heal. He called me his therapist, said I was saving his life. But when his fiancée threw those handwritten letters at my feet, screaming that I was a homewrecker, I realized I'd been living a lie. I wasn't his therapist. I was his secret. You know that feeling when you think you're doing the right thing, but deep down, something doesn't sit right. When you tell yourself you're just being kind, just being helpful, but there's this little voice whispering that maybe you're crossing a line you can't uncross. If you've ever found yourself in that gray area between helping someone and falling for them, then you absolutely need to hear what happened to me. I'm about to tell you a story that will make you question everything you think you know about emotional boundaries. It's about how I convinced myself I was being a good person, a professional, a friend. How I told myself I was saving someone's life when really, I was destroying 3 lives in the process. This isn't just another love triangle story. This is about manipulation, about how we can fool ourselves into believing our own lies, and about how karma has a way of showing up exactly when you least expect it. So if you're ready to dive into a story that'll have you examining every relationship in your own life, hit that like button right now. And trust me, you're going to want to subscribe because stories like this one don't just entertain you, they change how you see the world. They change how you see yourself. And after you hear what happened when Jessica found those letters, you'll never look at the phrase just helping the same way again. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd get involved in someone else's relationship. I mean, I'm Lisa, 28 years old, a licensed therapist with my own practice. I help people fix their lives, not complicate them. But sometimes life has a way of putting you exactly where you think you'd never be. It was a Tuesday morning, at my favorite coffee shop when I first met Daniel. I was sitting there, trying to decompress after a particularly heavy session with a client, when this guy at the next table started crying. Not the quiet, dignified kind of crying. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and broken. My therapist instincts kicked in before my common sense could stop me. "Hey," I said, moving to his table. "Are you okay?" Daniel looked up at me with these eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world. 32 years old, but he looked so much older in that moment. "I'm sorry," he said, wiping his face with his sleeve. "I don't usually break down in public like this. That's how it started. Not in my office, not with professional boundaries and intake forms. Just 2 strangers, in a coffee shop, one of them falling apart and the other thinking she could help." Daniel told me he'd lost his job 3 months ago, been struggling with anxiety and depression ever since. His whole world had crumbled, and he felt like he was drowning. "My fiancé tries to understand," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Jessica's a good person, but she doesn't really get it. She thinks I should just snap out of it, find another job, move on. But it's not that simple." I found myself nodding, offering the same kind of validation I gave my clients. "Depression isn't something you just snap out of," I told him. "It's like trying to swim with weights tied to your ankles." The relief in his eyes was immediate. "Exactly," he said. "You get it." That should have been my first red flag. When someone tells you that you understand them better than the person they're supposed to marry, that's not a compliment. That's a warning sign. But in that moment, all I saw was someone who needed help. And I convinced myself I was just being a good human being. We talked for 2 hours that day. When we finally parted ways, Daniel looked like a different person. "Thank you," he said. "I feel like I can breathe again." I should have left it at that. I should have given him my business card, suggested he make an appointment, kept it professional. Instead, I said, "Same time next week." And just like that, I stepped into a world I wasn't prepared for. What started as weekly coffee meetings quickly became something I couldn't control. Daniel would text me in the middle of the night, saying he couldn't sleep, that his thoughts were spiraling. "You're the only one who understands," he'd write. "Can we meet tomorrow? I really need to talk." I told myself I was just being a good friend. After all, I wasn't charging him. We weren't in my office, and technically, he wasn't my patient. But deep down, I knew I was using my professional skills in a very unprofessional way. I was giving him therapy without the boundaries, without the ethical guidelines that keep both therapist and client safe. Our meetings became daily, then twice daily. Daniel would call me his real therapist, saying I understood him in ways Jessica never could. "She gets frustrated when I'm depressed," he'd tell me, "but you see the real me. You don't judge me." The first letter came on a rainy Thursday. Daniel handed me a folded piece of paper as we sat in the park. "I wrote you something," he said, almost shyly, "just to say thank you." I should have handed it back. I should have said this was inappropriate. Instead, I opened it right there in front of him. "Dear Lisa," it began. "You came into my life like an angel when I was drowning. You saved me when I didn't think I could be saved. You're not just helping me heal, you're giving me a reason to live." My heart did something it shouldn't have done. It fluttered. Here was this man, pouring out his gratitude, his soul, onto paper. For me, because of me, I felt important, needed, powerful, in a way that my regular therapy sessions never made me feel. "This is beautiful," I whispered, and I meant it. "I was hoping you'd write me back," he said, his eyes searching mine. "I know it's not normal, but nothing about what we have is normal, is it?" That should have been my second red flag. When someone tells you that your relationship isn't normal, they're usually right, but I was already too deep to see clearly. I was already emotionally invested in a way that had nothing to do with professional helping and everything to do with personal need, so I wrote him back. Just a simple note, I told myself, just to acknowledge his gratitude. But as I handed him that folded paper the next week, I crossed a line I didn't even know existed. I became complicit in something that would destroy everything I thought I knew about myself. The letters became our secret language, our private world where Jessica didn't exist and professional boundaries were just suggestions. By month 3, our letters had become something I couldn't have imagined when this all started. Daniel wasn't just thanking me anymore, he was telling me he loved me. "I know this is complicated," he wrote in one letter that I kept folded in my wallet. "I know I'm supposed to marry Jessica in 6 months, but what we have is real. Lisa, you've shown me what it feels like to be truly understood." I should have stopped it right there. I should have reminded him that he was engaged, that I was supposed to be helping him, not falling for him. Instead, I wrote back. I told him I cared about him too, that our connection was unlike anything I'd experienced. I convinced myself I was helping him work through his feelings, that this was still somehow therapeutic. The lies we built together became elaborate. Daniel told Jessica he was seeing a therapist, me, technically, though she didn't know my name. "She thinks I'm making real progress," he'd tell me with a smile that made my stomach twist. "She's so proud of me for getting help." I helped him craft stories about our sessions. We'd discuss what he should tell Jessica about his therapy homework, or his breakthrough moments. I became an accomplice in deceiving a woman I'd never met. A woman who was planning her wedding while her fiancé was falling in love with someone else. But Jessica wasn't as naive as we thought. She started noticing things: how Daniel's mood would lift after his therapy sessions, how he'd come home with this strange energy, almost giddy. She noticed the way he'd guard his phone, how he'd step outside to take certain calls. She saw the changes in him, and some part of her knew they weren't just from regular therapy. One afternoon, while Daniel was at work, Jessica decided to pack for an upcoming trip. She was looking through his closet when she found it. A shoebox tucked behind his winter coats. Inside were months of our letters, carefully organized by date. Love letters, letters that talked about our future together, about how we understood each other in ways she never could. Jessica sat on their bedroom floor and read every single one. She read about how Daniel felt trapped in their relationship, how he was only staying with her out of obligation. She read about our secret meetings, our growing feelings, our plans to be together after he figured things out. The woman who was supposed to walk down the aisle in 3 months discovered that her fiancé was having an emotional affair with his so-called therapist, and she had the evidence to prove it. The confrontation happened on a Wednesday. Daniel and I were sitting at our usual spot in the park when I saw a woman walking toward us with purpose. She was carrying something in her hands, a shoebox that I recognized with a sinking feeling in my stomach. "Are you Lisa?" she asked, her voice eerily calm. I nodded, unable to speak. "I'm Jessica, Daniel's fiancée." She opened the box and threw our letters at my feet. Months of carefully written words scattered across the ground like evidence at a crime scene. "I found these in his closet. All of them." The world stopped. Daniel went pale, stammering something about how it wasn't what it looked like, how I was his therapist, how this was all part of his treatment. But Jessica wasn't listening to him. She was looking at me with a mixture of pain and disgust that I'll never forget. "You call yourself a therapist," she said, her voice breaking. "You knew he was engaged. You knew I was planning our wedding while you were writing love letters to my fiancé." That's when it hit me. Seeing those letters scattered on the ground, hearing Jessica's voice crack with betrayal, I realized what I'd actually been doing. I hadn't been helping Daniel. I'd been enabling his emotional affair. I'd been the other woman, hiding behind my professional identity to justify the unjustifiable. I thought I was helping him, I whispered. But even as the words came out, I knew how hollow they sounded. Helping him? Jessica laughed bitterly. You were helping him lie to me. You were helping him plan a life with you while I was tasting wedding cakes and picking out flowers. Daniel tried to salvage the situation. He chose Jessica, of course. He claimed our relationship had been purely therapeutic, that I'd misunderstood his gratitude for something more. He painted me as the delusional therapist who'd developed inappropriate feelings for a vulnerable client. But Jessica wasn't buying it. She'd read the letters, she knew the truth, and she gave me a choice: disappear from their lives completely, or she'd report me to the state licensing board for unethical conduct. I chose to disappear. I cut off all contact with Daniel, deleted his number, threw away the letters I'd kept. I started seeing my own therapist, finally admitting that I'd crossed every boundary that existed to protect both therapist and client. The wedding happened 3 months later. I heard about it through mutual friends, saw the photos on social media. Daniel looked happy. Jessica looked radiant. And I looked at those photos knowing that I'd almost destroyed something beautiful because I'd convinced myself that my feelings were more important than their relationship. Sometimes karma doesn't come with lightning bolts and dramatic justice. Sometimes it comes as quiet realization that you were never the hero of the story you thought you were living. Looking back now, 2 years later, I can see the story clearly for what it was. I wasn't Daniel's therapist, and I wasn't his great love either. I was his emotional affair, wrapped in the convenient disguise of professional help. I was the woman who helped him lie to his fiancée while convincing myself I was saving his life. The hardest part wasn't losing Daniel, it was losing the version of myself I thought I was. I'd built my entire identity around being the person who helps others, who fixes broken things, who makes people's lives better. But sometimes, when we're so focused on being needed, we forget to ask whether we're actually helping or just feeding our own ego. I learned that emotional boundaries aren't just professional guidelines, they're protection. They protect the client from therapists who might exploit their vulnerability, and they protect therapists from clients who might use that vulnerability to manipulate us into becoming something we never meant to be. Daniel and Jessica are still married. I heard they moved to another state, started fresh somewhere new. I hope they're happy. I hope Jessica was able to trust again, and I hope Daniel learned that real love doesn't require deception. As for me, I'm still a therapist, but I'm a different kind of therapist now. I understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is maintain your boundaries, even when someone is begging you to cross them. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever found yourself in a situation where helping someone became something more complicated, please hit that like button. Your engagement helps stories like this reach people who need to hear them. And if you've been the Jessica in this story, if you've been betrayed by someone who claimed they were just helping, know that it wasn't your fault. Trust your instincts. They're usually right. Drop a comment below if you've ever struggled with boundaries in your own relationships, professional or personal. Sometimes sharing our stories helps other people recognize the patterns before they get too deep. And don't forget to subscribe, because I'll be sharing more stories about the lessons we learn when life doesn't go according to plan. Remember, the line between helping and enabling is thinner than we think, and sometimes the most important person we need to save is ourselves.